Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all of our panelists for being here today. And we do know that our minority-owned small businesses play a critical role in the success of all of our communities. And I'm glad we are having this conversation about how we can give these essential businesses the tools that they need to survive this crisis and lead then on the front lines for economic recovery. Earlier this month, I had the pleasure of meeting with a number of local leaders of our Black community in Des Moines. And one of the gentlemen that I spoke with is Isaiah Knox. He is the executive director of Urban Dreams, which is a nonprofit that's focused on financial empowerment for underserved and underrepresented populations. Very important. I was happy to hear about Isaiah's experience receiving a PPP loan, as well as the positive impact it has had on his nonprofit. He, of course, relying on technical assistance and that long time relationship that he had developed with the bank, he was able to overcome some of those initial obstacles to receive the loan. And he stressed the importance, just as we have heard today, of having a lender who knows the community and has more than just the transactional relationship with the borrower, as well as the training that he had received in this area. So we have discussed a lot about that today, but I did want to give a shout out because I think it's been echoed so many times over how important it is that our local lenders, our local credit unions have that relationship with those in our underserved communities. And so what I won't do, I won't dive into that because we have heard a significant amount about how to develop those relationships, and we need to lean on our lenders to work on developing those relationships. But what I would like to pivot to is an area that I am very concerned about with the impact that COVID-19 is having on our childcare businesses, which have seen the significant declines in enrollment and revenue. And of these childcare businesses, half are minority owned. 45% of our childcare workforce are Black, Latino, or Asian. And according to a recent survey, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, 2 out of 5 childcare providers and half of minority-owned childcare businesses are, quote, certain that they will close permanently without additional public assistance, end quote. So it is critical that we are providing additional relief to stabilize these businesses, which is why I recently introduced legislation that would create back to work childcare grants, and it would provide 9 months of financial assistance for childcare programs to make sure that they can safely reopen and make it through this pandemic. Just very briefly, if I could ask our panelists, and maybe if we could go to Marla, if you could answer the impact of keeping these childcare providers afloat and its impact on those minority communities, it would be very helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. I didn't get to it in my testimony because the written comments that I made were longer than the time allotted, but one of the client profiles that I featured was a Latina-owned childcare business in Washington, D.C., Little Angels Child Development. They currently serve 7 families and have only had 3 of those 7 families confirm that they are considering continuing to use them, just given all of the considerations around COVID, both from a safety point of view and then their own economic capacity to pay for the service. And so, yes, childcare is actually one of the 6 industries that has been sort of the highest hit of the PPP loans that we have made. It's one of the 6 highest industries that's represented in the portfolio of PPP loans that we have made. We have always seen in the Latino and African American community this to be a very strong and vital business type, both for starting and expanding. And it has so many ripple effects because it's also affecting the ability of the people who use the child care center to work. As you may have seen earlier, I had my daughter's literally sitting next to me right now. I don't have childcare. My other children are in high school, so they're labor intensive. But that being said, this is a real struggle that we're all facing. And the childcare centers are so essential, not just for the owners and their livelihoods and their employees and their livelihoods, but for those of us who, are trying our very best and in many cases having to work even harder than ever while juggling children, homeschooling, all of this. I think, part of the reason why I had my daughter show her face is because I think we're all sort of living in this fallacy that we're not all really juggling this, insane balance or lack of balance in this time period. And so, I think it's excellent that you are bringing that bill to bear.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is all very important. One, to be able to provide those the services and lending necessary for our minority communities, but then also the ability to provide care for their little ones as well. I struggle with that as a young mother myself, and so we want to make sure that all of our businesses are successful, and this is one way that we can do it. So thank you so much. Incredibly important topic. I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. I yield back.